So, Kat, I am so excited you're here because I actually just got to know you through this whole project, which is celebrating Abby's 40th anniversary. And we decided to do this as we started cleaning out the archive room in January. So, like, as the norm, everybody from Columbia, all the members get together in January and do all of this work on the boat to get it ready for the season, right? It's what volunteers do, it's what members do, and it's what we do as a community. So we got together and we decided, okay, if we're going to go and clean out this archive room, we really want to go through and see everything that we have down there. And boy, was a treasure chest. And boy, I'm so happy that you were there to kind of walk us through some of these these pieces that we found, these letters and photos. And it just, brought up so many memories because you were one of the people that sailed Abby down here 40 years ago. And so I'm going to quit talking in a minute and turn this over to you to tell your story, because you told us so many stories over the past month, and it's such a treasure to share this with the entire membership.
Thank you, Kirsten. It's really nice to get to know the people that are really pulling everything together today. And I think that the crew that was lucky enough to be able to be on the Abbey and got selected just felt that it was the biggest honor. And when we saw the huge vessel in Picto, Nova Scotia, it blew everybody away, except, of course, for the Merchant Marine, who were used to large vessels. Thank goodness.
How were people chosen?
I wrote a letter. They said, who wants to go? And I wrote a letter that said everything I knew about me and hoped that something was amusing or that they would find it useful. I could do something. Because, I was a sailor, but it wasn't a penguin we were picking up. So
what did you say about yourself that got you on that ship?
I started with my education, which ended after a year of college. And, I was a pre-med major, as everyone is in their first year of college. But I meant it sincerely. That was what I would have pursued. But I didn't. And so that was just a random sentence in there. And I did tell them that I knew how to cook and that I knew how to supply a ship. And I felt I could be the chief steward. And that was that was the job I was angling for. And Bill Haller got that, I think, because he had some, during his college years, he did some work in a bar and grill, but he did a great job. We had all kinds of stuff to cook with. And as nurse, I lasted a couple of days. I stood watches. We were 4 on and 4 off, like a Mac race watch system. And I moved around the vessel. I assigned myself to every place. I was all the way aft in the propeller room, the 2 big shafts, checking gauges for 4 hours. And very nervous because of the watertight doors I had to pass through over and over again, thinking of all the movies that I'd seen. And that was the first 2 days. We were in pack ice up to 25 feet thick, I believe. So the sound of that hull going through the ice was tremendous and amplified from that station. So I stood my watches, not on the bridge. I wasn't on the bridge until the very end of the tour because everybody got a chance to be at that helm and do what Captain Pike told you to do. You didn't really exactly drive the vessel. He told you where to head and so on and so forth. And notably, that was in the middle of Lake Michigan because, they wouldn't want me to hit anything. I had to stand on some kind of platform because I was too short to see over the wheel. But yes, I got a turn at the helm, but that wasn't during the first 2 days. And during the first 2 days, we had the epic roll, something like 57 degrees, which is over 25 in each direction in rapid order. We broke out of the ice for a moment, and the ship did this number. And that's when I actually performed as nurse. I went to the galley and nobody was hurt. There was huge mess. All this china, which would be collectible today, was smashed, and big jars of olives, and it was ghastly, but no one was hurt. And I went all the way through the engine room and every place else to see if anyone had been injured in the event, and everybody was fine.
You stopped in Montreal at some point, didn't you? Was that after this rule?
Oh, yes. Yeah, we were out of the ice by then, and we needed to stop in Montreal. We were using water from jerry cans on the foredeck because we joked that we all had a Coke can full of water as a ration because we didn't have enough water. The vessel was heavy enough. We didn't put enough fuel on. We put enough fuel on to get to Montreal, as I understand it, but it was very expensive on Picto and Nova Scotia on an island. So we got to the mainland to fuel up more, and that stop was supposed to be 3 hours. And now I understand we got oil and water and fuel, and that we also needed some parts. There's a memoir from our sailing master, Hugh Hagan, that'll be part of the record that explains more about the technical stuff. So,
well, and just listening to you talk about this trip over and the people. So one of the things we found was this crew list. I mean, does anybody stand out? Any memories come to mind?
oh my gosh. Well, everybody, they all became, it was only 9 days, but we knit together as a crew, and certainly not the first crew for Abby and Columbia, because we never would have been on that vessel if we hadn't had the leadership of the board and the Commodores that figured out what we were going to do about almost 100-year-old ship that was going to sink. There was no way we could repair her, and you could literally put your hand through the hull in places. So it was no longer a vessel. Something had to be done. And so selling bonds and getting to the point where we could step aboard a vessel that they sourced from all the vessels available in the world that we could conceivably afford, and then vote on. Here's the bond members. We found this in a binnacle. It's a former binnacle editor, but not this year. We have this in the record of our bondholders. And the people, I know most of them, of course, everybody on the Abbey crew, but that's what brought us to the point where we could be crew for the vessel. And everybody that was a member at the time, I'm sure, had a story of why I should have, why I didn't, and why I most definitely wanted to be on the Abbey. So, including my daughter.
Well, I have, one of the other things we found was this whole pack of certificates. And I'm not sure if these are certificates that people didn't pick up, or do they know, but we have, it's the roles that people performed, right?
Mm.
So 007?
007 is Jim Wicklander. And I don't believe he picked this up, but he was in charge of selling those bonds. And he was absolutely instrumental in the fact that we got to where we got. So,
how about Chief Fuse Puller?
Well, I pulled this out because Al Ischinger was one of 2 people that actually lived aboard the Abbey after we got her here as caretaker. So that is a really unusual job description, and one that went far into the future. So,
well, you also have on your lab a whole board of pictures that you captured, you put together, right?
Right.
Do you want to walk through a little bit? I mean, and these will be, we'll have opportunities to share on the weekend that people come. Do you want to walk through some of the pictures and any moments that stand out, I should say?
Okay. Well, they're, of course, taken a long time ago. So I brought my camera, and it just goes chronologically through seeing the boat, which was getting sandblasted when we got there. And we stayed in Picto, Nova Scotia, an extra night because this ship still had sand on her, and we had to get that off before we transited. So
how long did it take total? We never met.
It was 9 days.
9 days. Okay.
from April 5th to April 14th. And we were supposed to leave a day earlier, but we didn't. And that gave me the opportunity to go into town and buy flip-flops, actually Canadian Mountie flip-flops. So that
There were Canadian Mountie.
they didn't know either, but they were my size, and they enabled me to go into the showers, which were individual and all around the ship, but they were uniformly grungy and awful. And just the thought of walking in there barefoot was just not going to happen. So at some point, somebody cleaned one of the heads, and then it became a secret to know which one was the one that was really clean.
So wasn't that somebody's role? So you all took
No, no. Well, it was 9 days, and we were really busy. As nurse, I did what I did for those first couple of days, and then unfortunately, Betty Johnson, who was a messman, which meant she was the galley crew, was allergic to dust and mold, which this vessel had nothing but going on. So she didn't feel well. I said, great, you be nurse and take care of yourself, and I'll go cook because you're in no shape to. And so she did. She taught me yoga in between times, and, I got to know her. It was great. But I stepped into the galley role, and we were knocking ourselves out. It was 61 people, 3 meals a day. We did everything, prep, dishes, and it was just too much. We finally figured out after maybe the third day, if we split the crew into 2, we could do 2 meals on, 2 meals off, and actually have time to sleep and do something else in between. And then it worked more smoothly. And we started stuff like a stock pot, and we really got into the cooking bit. Served individual omelets to 61 people. And we never finished a meal unless we served 62, because Bill Zeman always ate twice. It's a Chicago cop.
So a lot of work, but I know there's a rum bottle over there too, right? So there has to be a story in the coat of that.
That is because at noon, as this vessel went under the Mac Bridge, I had done, two Macs by then, 78 and 81, maybe 82, don't know. At any rate, Jules had me and others come to his cabin and have a tote of rum as we went under the Mac Bridge. And so it was high noon. And the rum bottle is quite unique. And he gave it to me years later. I didn't know he kept it. And so I threw it in the attic. And now with this scavenger hunt for things, it has come up.
Oh, it's going to make it fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's a pretty bottle. It's not an American brand. So yeah, I think so. Or it could be Brit. You'd have to read it. I don't recall. But it could have been purchased in Montreal because Bob Jones and Janine Ryan and I were sent ashore. No one had shore leave. We were just acquiring these things, and we were going to leave in 3 hours. So we were assigned a big list of things that the crew felt they wanted after a couple of days at sea. And yes, there was a list for beverages, but there was also extraordinary stuff on there. Like some of these guys actually wanted necessities for their bathroom. They wanted towels and a throw rug. And so we had this crazy scavenger hunt with Normand, our cab driver, that took us all around Montreal. And we came back to the ship with this cab loaded with stuff, only to find that there were just a few officers aboard and everyone else was on shore leave. We had just done the shopping. And so Normand stayed, and the taxi driver stayed with, and we went out in Montreal that night with Ted Manhart and Bill Haller, and heard Benny and the Jets in French.
I was just going to ask you. Montreal has great music and great food.
It did. We had a good time with Normand.
should we look so that like maybe come up to that? We have so well things on the table.
Let's finish with this crew because, these certificates, the most significant thing to me when you talk about our crew members, I had an apron that I wore and it was really grungy. And Bob Hirsch was an artist and an architect. And as a crew member, I'm not too sure what his job description was. I think he was in the engine room. But, he was like me, an able-bodied seaman, AB. So I don't know exactly what his assignment was. But what he did was take my apron and draw this, our journey. He drew the Great Lakes, and he drew our journey from Picto, Nova Scotia to Chicago across the top of the apron. So as we were getting, we got a dollar bill in pay. That was part of the shtick. This was the largest yacht ever to come through the St. Lawrence Seaway, privately owned yacht. And so we got a dollar bill, and most of the crew had all the crew sign their dollar bill. Mine's pristine, and in my book, I had everybody sign the apron. And so that had Bob Hirsch's art. These certificates are also Bob Hirsch's art. And he talked about, they say, pulling together. And it has Columbia Yacht Club, Monroe Street Harbor, Chicago, Illinois. He did a lot of these pieces for the Binnacle or for whatever came along. And including in the Stenard's collection of pictures, lots of people have these and have seen them. They did a montage and they've got people identified. Well, they also have some of Bob Hirsch's art above on the vessel. So he was pretty cool. I hope he still is pretty cool. I tried to find him. He went to California to live with his son. So
before we hit the table, is there any pictures? I know. Okay, so I saw one of you with your apron in here. I know there's at least one in here.
Even if it's never to be found again. Well, there's also a picture of Stella the boiler. Yeah, they named the boiler, and if you get down that far on the ship, the boiler does have a name. She's Stella.
We're going to make that part of the scavenger.
You can't go that low. She's below decks. You can only go to the control room. So, yeah, there's a picture of me wearing the apron a couple of times, but then we had a party probably a year in, and Ralph Kruger is holding the apron up. Next, I'm wearing it, but he's holding it off to the side. So that's a pretty good picture of it. Anyway.
So you moved from ship nurse to ship cook?
I did. And when we...
Oh, wait. Okay, you've talked about this because we've talked about putting the menu together for that weekend. Okay, the best that you said chili?
Oh,
tell.
Well, we like to, as messmen, we like to mess with the guys that were there. So what we did was make 2 big vats of chili because you couldn't make enough in any of the pots that we had. And we got frisky and decided we'd label one wimpy and one macho and see who liked what and how they compared the taste. They were exactly the same, and everybody had an opinion about what was spicier or more desirable or something.
Any memorable people that did they choose? Can you remember who chose which were?
Well, as one of the 9 women aboard, I made a note that none of the women chose wimpy.
Because we're not wimpy.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
So, yeah, everybody that was part of that crew became very special during the journey, and then afterwards, working on the ship. All the merchant marine. There were 15 merchant marine, 6 Canadians, and the merchant marines stayed as members for a number of years. Some are still members today and coming to the celebration on the 14th. And the Canadians. A lot of Canadians have visited the vessel, but only Leonce Arsenault, who was an oiler and worked the vessel as an oiler. His father worked on the Abaquit. So he had a picture with him of himself standing on one of the propellers, and you could see just how enormous the ship was. So Leonce came back, and he visited, and we took him sailing on our Tartan 10. Lot of wonderful people, a lot of wonderful memories. Absolutely. Love this crew.
Yeah, I am so new, but it's just been wonderful to get to know everybody on board.
Look what you've got ahead.
Right? I know it's very exciting. Let's look at some of these because do you have these? Okay, especially these T-shirts. Like really. So 9 days on the Abbey, right? So a lot happened. Should we talk about maybe because I spent some time like looking at all of these like letters and newspaper clippings. So a lot of planning went into this. And then you had the 9 days, and then I know we're gonna toast at the end. So maybe just walk us through some of this if you can.
Well, everybody had an assignment, and working a vessel of this size, of course, with most of us being unfamiliar with the whole thing, it took a lot of work for those officers to keep us able-bodied seamen doing what we needed to do. And, of course, the nuts and bolts of feeding people was intense, too. But, yeah, we were busy almost the whole time. I've got a copy of a newsletter that one of the creative crewmen put out during our trip, and it's fanciful and it's fun, and that was Jay Fitz. So, and Bob Hurst found time for artwork, and this is Jay's newsletter. Among the things in here, you'll get an interesting report on the sad note on the ship's cat who disappeared. And then something about the galley is mentioned. So he had a great sense of humor and somehow found time to type this out and reproduce it for all of us. So, and thanks to, I think, Herman Ebner was librarian that found those copies way after the event.
So was the newsletter put out every day?
Yes, he had several issues, I think 3. And
yeah, they're each dater. So one from April 7th.
That's from 2 days out.
Okay. One from April 9th. That would be 4 days out. And then issue.
Oh, yeah, the blackout. We were stuck in a lock overnight and we lost power. So we had no lights at all on the ship. And if you've ever been below decks, it's really intensely hard to get around down there if you don't know it. And that was quite an event. It didn't last long. Captain, our sailing master, Hugh Hagan, will be with us on the 14th, and I'll bet you he remembers quite clearly how that all came down. But we had one of the merchant marines was Gene McCormick, and thinking of night and the Abbey, he brought his bagpipes at his family's request, he told us. So he would walk around the ship, and we'd hear these bagpipes, and we're out in the middle of the water, and here's this wonderful sound, but kind of eerie because bagpipes. So, yep.
Did he do that during the blackout too?
No, I don't think. Yeah, he was probably busy. But
can you talk a little bit more about some of the different jobs on the ship? And did you have any training? Anyone before? Not at all. Not at all. To discuss what you were about to do beforehand, or just all show up and get your assignment?
I knew I was nurse, and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. I was like a kind of a joke line about the 1 year in college. Yeah, everybody's a doctor. So I took a course in CPR. I did take it seriously. I looked at medical records that we had to submit, and I got extremely nervous because our doctor was a dentist, Dr. Bob Jones. And I did try to recruit Dr. David Axelrod, an actual MD that doesn't just do teeth. And I couldn't recruit him, but he and I did stop a member from choking. I knew the Heimlich maneuver, and I knew when somebody needed it. And yep, in the old club ship dining room, Maggie Sennett lived a lot of years to help us out with the Penguin Fleet after that. So that was my training. It was and I don't know that anybody else had any training. And the Merchant Marine had licenses that they were keeping active, but they volunteered their time. And it was Hugh Hagan that I believe found his fellows from the King's Pointers that came to our rescue. And some of the films shot, there's a recording from one of the few times I was on the bridge. I heard a communication between our vessel and another vessel that came close when we were still in the ice. We weren't out of the bay yet. And it came close to lower its ensign and salute the Abbey as she was leaving. And the communication between the two bridges included somebody in the background on their ship saying, "Don't get too close, there's a bunch of amateurs aboard." Which was accurate.
Really? That's so
Uh-huh. So, yeah, the ice was just something, of course, that I'd never seen or heard before. And with it being that thick and for a couple of days solid, it was quite the thing to see this vessel and just a crack that shot to the horizon. And you could see marine life. I saw harp seals on the ice and stuff like that. But yeah, and most of the time I really was in the galley because those first couple of days we just worked too hard at our job. We didn't understand how to do it. So it was a learning experience, I bet, all the way around.
Did you have to use any of your pre-med skills?
Fortunately, those weren't called up on because I really didn't have any, except telling Betty Johnson that, yeah, I know you don't feel well, so yes, you should probably sit down and I should do something. So, yeah, it was incredible for all of us, I think, and an honor to bring the ship here.
And what made you want to sign?
Oh my gosh, adventure, and I could afford it. I read someplace that I paid $125, which was probably a horrific amount at the time, and I had to pay for my fare to fly to Halifax and take a bus to Picto and stay one night in Halifax. So that was, but for a vacation, and I didn't take many. That was pretty exciting. I think that 9 days was the longest my mom ever watched the kids. And they were a handful probably because they were like 15 and 16 then. So, and my daughter definitely wanted to be on board. So, and the kids got to come aboard that night when we got into Navy Pier. They had to climb a Jacob's ladder, which I did in Detroit. John Boyle and I got off the vessel because we wanted to make phone calls, and we were allowed to run to the phone and make a call and come back. And then we used that same Jacob's ladder to let people climb aboard, and it was kind of scary for a lot of them. And so my kids came aboard and they ran all around the ship and learned a lot about it. And then I put them back ashore because the next day, the people that were going to come to Kenosha, the bondholders, were going to triumphantly bring the vessel into Chicago, and we couldn't get into Kenosha. We were told that we would tear the docks up. The Lake Michigan was so roiled up that the Canadians were quite respectful. It was another episode of giving respect to the Lake Michigan as the treacherous body of water it can be.
Was it a party when you got back?
Well, it was 8:30 at night on a Sunday, and people were kind of exploring the ship and running all over it. But what we had to do in the galley was figure out what to do with the food. And we were going to feed everybody that was on this little excursion. We took the people that couldn't get to Kenosha out around the crib and back when we came in through the lock and put the Abbey into what is now DuSable Harbor, what was called the Turning Basin because it wasn't connected to Monroe Street Harbor. So that journey entailed taking care of almost everything that we had in the galley, and we did this big food spread, and I had a lot of work to do. So yes, Mom got the children back because I was still busy. They didn't want to go. And the only thing that we really messed up on was the stock pot because somebody put it in the cooler not thinking that the cooler would be turned off. And it was weeks before somebody opened that cooler.
I wouldn't have wanted.
Oh, it was horrible. There were a lot of messes that were cleaned up by the second crew that really worked tons and tons of hours. Finally, into the night, we would come during weeknights, and I have a montage that I put together of that crew led by Dr. Dan Newman. And there were a number of people that have these second certificates by Bob Hirsch, and indescribable messes, all over the place, and the stripping of brass that had been painted because they couldn't afford to run this vessel. They kept reducing crew and painting things so they didn't have to polish them. And so we started backing that out and finding the beauty that this ship was the largest icebreaker in the world when she was commissioned. And she was commissioned for that service. The bookmark panels in the room that we're in, that's wonderful workmanship. And the one etched glass door that we have up here, beautiful detail. And so she was quite the vessel, and lots of people in Canada remember her. And now, of course, there's a bridge. You don't need an abbey anymore.
Well, let me ask, because this is reminding me, it says bring it to Columbia all January. Was this the first time these Januaries, work parties started, or had they been going on long before? Because this still happens now.
It does happen now, and I don't recall. I was skipjack in 74 and joined in 75. And I don't recall January work projects, but maybe I just skipped them. I don't know. The kids were a lot younger then, so I was probably pretty busy with them. But no, I don't. I remember that as being an Abbey thing, and so and which continues to this day. Abbey still has her cruise.
Well, it looks like they're working on the lights in the bar, just like they did this year, right?
Right, and you can see that they're painted there.
Uh-huh.
So it was Ted Manhart that took that job on. He was one of the most unusual. When you talk about assignments, whatever his assignment was on this list, he didn't prefer it. And so he assigned himself as well. And
So he's sailor.
Yeah, very good sailor, actually. So, yeah, and there's a plaque that nobody probably understands in memory of Ted Manhart, and that's this Ted. So he was supposed to be an oiler, but I don't think he was below decks much. And he also found his own accommodations, someplace below decks, below the crew quarters on the rail deck. He decided he didn't want a room with 3 other guys, and he found someplace, and that was his spot. And as far as my accommodations with one of the married women, Elizabeth Barnes was my roommate, and we got into this cabin, which is forward of the entrance now and on the starboard side. And it was flooded, and we had to go find wood so we could walk to the bunks. And I didn't want to put my sleeping bag on the bunk, but I had to. And at one point, we were trying to look out the porthole, and we were standing on a steam pipe, and her shoes melted around the steam pipe. It was so hot. We had to open the window because it was really hot in the vessel. And, even though we were going through pack ice, we were trying for some degree of comfort for the event. It was not a luxury cruise.
How did everyone come up with what they were going to pack? And I read some people had to even bring their own tools and lights because there weren't those items available.
Those were people that planned a lot better than me. I brought my sleeping bag, and, I wore Al Barkley's float coat. That was big because it's a life jacket and a really heavy coat, and he loaned it to me because it was going to be very, very cold, and he was being very, very kind. So he was a Tom Lawrence sailor, and befriended me and my mom. My mom was a skipjack with me. Befriended both of us from the time we stepped aboard in 74. So.
Well, I am curious. This was one of the coolest things we found. Some of this article from the Tribune saved from Chicago say hello to Abby. Was Chicago excited? I mean, do you remember any of that?
We did get coverage, and it was Dennis and Johnson. Dennis and Betty really worked to get our PR out there, and the Stenards did their bit, but that was the official one. So, and in subsequent years, we've had some really good stories about Abby being a unique ship. It's been in Sailing World. It's been in published a lot of places. So, yeah, everybody's pretty fond of Abby. That's Sonia Henning's book. Al Henning has a lot of important things as Commodore during the move and Vice Commodore when choosing the ship. What Al has to say about the acquisition of the Abby, which is an article that we have, and another one that has just come to light that I hadn't seen before. We've got a lot of important history that Sonia kept pictures and letters, and specifically pictures of the ship when she was new. These may have been ones that Al took during the walkthroughs to decide whether they were going to buy the vessel or not, and that became very important. The video was shot as well, and that video became very important when the delivery happened. They received the vessel in Picto and walked through and said, well, wait, this isn't the same. You've removed things. And we got a big credit for some of an etched glass door, among other things, that had disappeared as souvenirs to somebody someplace. So that was fortunate that they had the foresight to document, and Sonia has saved all of that for us.
It's so neat to see it because she's really graceful. You know, like she was graceful back then, and she still is, right?
She was, and she was the one that bought the in the line party photograph that we have here. That's my husband, past Commodore Jerry Thomas.
Oh.
And that's Frank Picorni, who's still writing wonderful letters for us.
Look at those mustaches.
Yeah, and if the work with those lines on the capstan, that was tough work, and this vessel would start to rock and roll, and went until Joe Mack figured out a system that we weren't chafing the lines and losing them and having to replace them and having emergencies in the middle of the night because the weather shifted and the vessel was in trouble. Line parties were a thing, and these coveralls that Jerry's wearing in the picture, and Frank as well, we all had them because Sonia bought them, and she gave us all badges. We all had, some kind of badge that was sewn on that said something funny. She was a treasure. She was so fun. And her son, Dana, raced with Heart of America Challenge, our America's Cup Challenge from Chicago Yacht Club. We were declared an arm of the sea so that Heart of America could race. Buddy Melges was the skipper, and Buddy Melges sailed in this club against Dennis Conner in Penguins as a teenager. Part of our One Design racing history that's so important. So I love those Penguins.
I just because we're at the spot of the table, this Virgie is so, and what I love is when we found this, it was like all folded up in the archive room. Right. And it is a little bit stained, it's
Really?
just a little, right. But I don't know if we can hold this up. It's going to be hanging in the...
They'll take all of us.
Yeah. But look at Kathleen, your signature is it.
Oh, yeah. Under Bruce Schimmerhorn and next to Bill Haller, the two guys that were leading the galley. It's about in the middle. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness. So every person that came over on the Abbey signed this, right?
Yeah, and we all got a hunk of the American flag that was
and that's
set up.
The book. We should take a peek at that. But this is incredible. And did this actually fly?
I wasn't in charge of that. I'm presuming yes, but it looks more like we cleaned with it.
Well, I don't know. It's one of those things like it makes it special.
It does, and that you found it. It was a surprise to me. So you found stuff that I haven't seen before, and it's really great.
Oh, it's a treasure chest.
And you're preserving it, and you're archiving it properly. It's a pleasure.
Well,
We've had good librarians before, but this is very good for Abby.
Yeah.
So
I have a team of librarians.
oh, do you? Well, considering that archive room when we dove into it 10 years ago, yes, it needed a team, a big one.
So this is, okay, this was another really cool thing we found. This is the last log, right? And then when the Abbey came into Chicago.
Right.
So I know we're going to scan this and keep this, but really incredible.
Well, is this okay? That is docking at Navy Pier. It's not, of course, the last docking, which was
Right.
yeah. And so Chris Bradford. Let's see. Yeah, Chris Bradford is the youngest crew member on the Abbey, and he turned 21 during the journey. The other celebration was Jean and Joan Stannard's anniversary. And we hung bed sheets around one of the tables in the cafeteria to make them a private dinner for that. But yeah, so it is Chris Bradford that signed off on this, and he says that Bradford, Fassbender were on watch. As before, all secure, resting at Navy Pier. And coming into Navy Pier was one of the times that I got called to the bridge. Oh, it looks like Ralph Kruger has something on here too. Shutdown crew securing ship, Ralph Kruger. So as we came into Navy Pier, Captain Pike let me have the spotlight. And so when I see the picture with the spotlight, as the picture was taken, that was me. Yeah. Hello, Chicago.
Oh, that is really cool.
He was such a gentleman and so kind. And so I took a picture of him polishing the brass threshold into the captain's quarters, where one of the two bathtubs on the ship was. But he was just lovely to work with, and he'd been with the vessel his entire career. He retired when she retired, and he came back into service when she did.
Did you wear one of these?
Oh, sure. Yep. John Boyle got those for all of us, and some kind of, I don't know, a white cap that was sort of part mesh, and it says ND Abbey across the top. So, yep. I have no idea when he got them and gave them to us. I don't think he didn't do it prior to the journey, but he showed up with them once. And he was very involved with the Abbey, refinishing one of those binnacles and taking over the bridge. The bridge has been renovated like lots of times, and the last time done by the Ebners is the best, the one we're going with now. But we were bridge bunnies. We worked with John Boyle. There were four women. Gisela Gonzalez, who owned a racing sailboat and did quite well, and Suhan Hill, and Mary Fran, Suga Hagen's niece. So
I think our greatest brainstorm today was for the anniversary. Yeah, and they have a bridge bunny cocktail. Correct. Very excited, right? Do you think that's
everybody should be excited? Oh, John Boyle would be excited.
And the speaking of cocktails, here's that rum we were talking about. It is Liverpool.
Okay, yeah. So
we were right.
Sprit.
And it's such a neat. I saw you. I've actually seen you wear this.
Only it's the bauble. It's for very special occasions, and it was on a like a fob, because it was given to the man who was Commodore. I think it's McGuire, and he was Commodore a couple of years in the early 1900s. So it was a beautiful thing presented to him with our burgee and I guess teeny tiny diamonds. I got it because one of the guys that did the worldwide search for Abbey, John Stovall, gave it to me when he found it in his memorabilia and wanted it to go. He was living in Florida and he wanted it to come back to Columbia. So now I have it. And I wear the bauble only on very special occasions, so I brought it today.
It's beautiful.
It is.
Well, okay, so there is a ton more on the ship.
I know.
I know we just went through the table. Anything else you want to mention? Any that stands out?
Can we do it all again? I mean, the trip, can we start there and do it all again?
I wish I could have been there.
Oh, I wish you had been too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, incredible.